appreciate him being willing to do all that. Nehemiah chapter number 9, we're going to start there. We're going to finish up, do a brief review. I've always taught repetition's the key to learning. Anybody ever heard that before? It is a mantra passed down through the centuries, and I think whoever wrote it handed it off to my dad, and so my dad will repeat himself a lot when he was instructing me and teaching me throughout the years, and I kind of do that too. And I don't want to be a broken record, but sometimes just looking at reviews in different perspectives, coming at it from another angle, always helps. We've been in the book of Nehemiah. Pastor asked me to go ahead and do it for a few weeks. Be in prayer for him. I know Matthew mentioned it, but he has that surgery tomorrow on his eye, and hopefully he'll be able to see much better. I'm afraid, I don't know if you're afraid, there will be jokes. If he can see better, there will be a lot of jokes Sunday about now he's afraid of the congregations. You just got to be ready. I'm trying to prep you for some dad jokes. And so how many of you just like dad jokes? Raise your hand. I've heard, Chris told me, Tirza, our new staff members, that she likes dad jokes. Who you're allergic to them because of being a saved Christian? Go ahead and raise your hand. That's what I'm just kidding. I love it. We have people. Oh yeah, there you go. Oh man, no, he comes up with some good ones though. He'll come up and tell it to me, and then I hear him telling Pastor, and then Pastor, I think he's claiming them for his own. But yeah, it's a blast. So I'm just ready for him to be in a great mood and his eyeballs working properly, and I'm already ready for the jokes about my own personal appearance. I'm getting ready, so I'm excited that he'll get that taken care of. Be in prayer for Miss Debbie. She put on Facebook she's got a surgery date now. She's in a lot of pain, and so there's a lot going into just getting to the surgery, the recovery process, and I know a good amount about recovering from surgery and having surgery and trepidation before surgery and what it takes to recover and physical therapy, and so I just want everybody to pray for her for sure, if you will, and pray for everybody. Man, it's we have that holiday. Who loves the holidays and Christmas? I mean, it's just great. You go through it. There's Christmas carolers everywhere. You're building gingerbread houses. There's fun. People are buying presents for one another. If you haven't done that yet, I do love Jimmy John's gift cards. Just kidding. But we just go through it, and then the first of the year hits. And some of you have New Year's resolutions. Some of you I don't do resolutions. I do goals. Some of you're basically right now doing failure, but we all kind of get in that mindset of we're going to make this year better. And I hope everyone has that mindset, and I hope it's Dewey Moy taught me, and I'd read it in books before, but I feel like he's the epitome of this guy, where when he was helping us so much in the school, he'd go 1% better every day, 1% better, 1% better, 1% better. And man, he would say it all the time, talk about repetition is the key to learning. And I promise. I had breakfast with him yesterday, and he hands me a book, and he goes, I just read this one. I read 2 books last week. I thought you'd like this one. And he handed me a book, and here's this guy. I joke with him that he's 63 years old, but he's pretending to be 77. But he just doesn't know how to stop, and he's always trying to get better. He doesn't try to coast, and I appreciate that about a guy like him. And I know a lot of people in this auditorium that you feel that way. That's who you are. And, hopefully you're doing that all year round, trying to get better. But New Year's is over now. And I don't know how you feel, but sometimes the hardest times for me is to just stay up and stay motivated in the humdrum of life. It's easy to get motivated when Hell's Gates is coming on and we got work to do and there's a project to do. But when you're in the middle of February and you forgot Valentine's Day again and your wife's mad at you and the kids are not doing their homework and you forgot that it was Wednesday, and you forgot to pack the right clothes, and you're exhausted, and you're tired, and another day. And I don't know how how your week's gone. I feel like I've had 3 Mondays in a row. You know how the Mondays can just be a Monday? You ever had a Monday on a Tuesday? You ever had a Monday on a Wednesday? You ever had a Monday on a Wednesday night? Yeah, I've had them. Experiencing one right now. Thanks a lot, Mac. But no, I'm kidding. Mac would never do anything wrong. Listen. We all can get there. So this is why Wednesday night I believe is so important. because it's very rare that I walk in church, I'm around the people of God, I'm having conversations, and I leave less encouraged than I walked in. There's a lot of times I walk in, and I don't want to be here. I shouldn't say that. You're probably like, why are we paying this guy? To which I'd say, I'm supposed to get paid? Just kidding. But, you come in and you just, come on, you don't always want to come. It's not always fun getting 2 and 3 and 4 kids ready and your husband ready and to pack them all in the car and to get them here. And then you have a wonderful dinner, and that's okay. But then Lexi and everybody, who helped with the dinner? I think April helped. Who else helped? Ann helped. Jessica, all these people helped. And you all, I'm going to split the bill however many ways I have to split it because you guys got some food on my shirt here, and the live stream's going to pick it up. And so I have a dry cleaning bill for you, Lexi. And I know, yeah. But you have one of those days I'm sitting there, I'm standing up eating because I don't like to sit down. And I'm standing up eating knowing I got to go to my office. And I look down. And I didn't do it. I don't know how it happened. But I somehow was accosted by some sauce from, I think, those roasted potatoes. Or I think it was salad dressing because I really just only ate salad. I had a little bit of green salad, a little bit of macaroni salad, a little bit of chicken salad, had some potato salad, and then at the end there was some cherry salad with a frosted vanilla dressing that I had. So, but yeah, about a third of it wound up on my shirt apparently. And I looked down, and you'd think Lexi would be like, I feel so bad for you. No, she's laughing at me. She laughed at me. Can you believe it? She laughed at me. Jesse, come on. Yeah, it's not fair. Anyway, so we have days, and that's why Wednesday night's important. And in that spirit, we're going to look at this with Nehemiah, and it's very intriguing to me. And so with Nehemiah, we have this beautiful story about how God impresses a burden upon Nehemiah's heart all the way in the court of an empire, the court of an emperor, and Artaxerxes gives him leave to come back, gives him the money, he pays for the project, he gives him an entourage. Nehemiah, the cupbearer, goes all the way back to his homeland of Jerusalem, and he spearheads this project to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. In 52 days, I don't know about you, but I appreciate someone who will get the job done, right? And just get to work and get something done. I get mad at myself when I have something on my to-do list over and over. You ever have anything on your agenda and you just push it off again and push it off again? I've had a few items like that lately, and I'm like, I just got to find time to do this. But when do you find time to shower? I don't know. That was a joke. But like you just, and he just got the job done. In 52 days, he built a wall around an entire city. Could you imagine if the state of Georgia could do road work that quick? There's a parcel, South Carolina, God bless that state. I do not want to be sued for defamation. But they have been working on I-85 between here and Charlotte, North Carolina, ever since, I think, before the advent of Christ. It's crazy. I'm talking one lane for who's ever driven that? Me and Larry Monroe talk about it a lot because he has to go up there in a truck and he hates it. And it's like, it's raining, you have a concrete wall on this side, a semi on this side, or a small child, or as my son found out, orange barrels that he clipped with my truck. And it's just such a tight, it's just frustrating, and could you imagine if the state of Georgia rebuilt that, or the state, well, maybe Georgia could do it faster, but the state of South Carolina just gets the road work done? Like, just get it done. Remember how long they were doing Browns Bridge, the exit there? Did anyone pass by there and think, why can't they just finish this? And I don't even know what the bureaucracy and the red tape is, but I don't know how you all are, but I have been an employee. I've done things on my own to try to put food on the table, and I've had employees before. And it doesn't matter if it's me working for myself, me working for someone else, or someone else working for me. I love it when people just get the job done. And Nehemiah did that. But when Nehemiah did that, it was a huge project. And I'm not saying it was easy to get amped up for it or easy to get motivated for it, but there was a project there. There was something there. There was this huge mountain to climb. There was a huge battle to face. You had Tobiah, you had Sanballat, you had people fighting against them. They fought. We looked at it already. They built the wall with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. That's dramatic. That's a made-for-TV movie if I've ever seen one. Like that is just, that could be the most incredibly interesting YouTube documentary that you could fall asleep to. It would be amazing to watch that. It's just dramatic. It's got drama. It's got suspense. It's got cliffhangers. Like, are they going to get it done? What's going to happen? We have some parts where the villains are laughing about, if a small animal crawls across that wall, it'll fall down. And then all of a sudden they get real nervous later when it's actually starting to happen. It's an amazing story. But we're going to look in here. We're going to look here in a minute. And we're going to see that there's a job to do after these big events happen. You've got to live life. And if we're not careful, as a Christian, it's very easy, if we're not careful, to kind of get addicted to those big experiences. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with big experiences. If you walk to this aisle and you're just bawling, if John Lynn comes to this aisle tonight and finally gets saved, that would be awesome. We'd have a saved Bible teacher at our academy. What a concept, right? He'd be blubbering. Lexi's leading to the Lord, like I told you weren't saved. And they get it all right, and it's wonderful. That's a great experience. And I don't care. I joke about it, and I'm pretty sure he's saved. I can't look into his heart if he has one. I'm pretty sure he's saved, but let's just say he's not. And if that actually happens, we'd rejoice with him. We'd be thrilled. I think, I don't care if it's late in life, early in life, if you've been in church your whole life. I don't care if you work on staff at a church or you've never even seen a staff person at a church. If you get saved, we're happy for you, right? That's a big event. And then you know how it is. And John gets saved and he goes back to his seat. And if we're not careful, he doesn't get disciples like he should, or maybe he starts to fall away a little bit. And you know how it is. You get motivated, something happens, you want to get into it, but the world knocks you down. You fight that world, the flesh, and the devil. And it can be hard at times. And then we have missions conference coming up. David Gates is going to come and preach to us. I love David Gates. He was one of the first people at Lighthouse to really make me feel welcome and just check on me. I had gone through some hard stuff right after we got here. And he kind of went to me and he said, man, I know some stuff's been going on, but how are you doing? And I'll never forget that he took time out of his day to ask me specifically how I was doing and how my wife and kids were doing with a lot of things that we were dealing with. And it always meant the world to me. So when Jamie Reynolds suggested David Gates to do the missions conference to me, and I'm like, oh, let me talk to Pastor. And talk to Pastor. Pastor's like, that sounds like a great idea. I love that he's coming in. And so David Gates is going to come up here and he's going to preach about a burden for the lost, and he's going to preach about giving money to missions. Believe it or not, we can do that. And he's going to talk about all this stuff that we can do to get the gospel to the entire world. We can do more in the Lighthouse Global Studios. We could do more at Lighthouse Christian Academy to be focused on missions. We could do more in our own family. You can pray for missionaries at your dining room tables. You can focus on them. You can give them care packages. You can do so much. Pray for them is the biggest thing we could do, right? And we get a burden, and John gets a burden, and there's another big event, and he comes to the altar, and he's crying and praying, and Lexi comes up there and says, are you getting saved again? Because I think, and then a big event. And if we're not careful, we kind of try to live off those big events, those big moments. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have big events. I'm not saying you shouldn't have big come to Jesus moments. I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, but in between those massive events of dedication or God getting a hold of your heart in a special way, you still have to live life. Your kids still need a Christian father and a good example in between the peaks of the mountain of your experiences in Christianity. And if I've seen it over and over. Teenagers can be really bad about this. And what happened, and they're young and they're immature, and a lot of this is a sign of immaturity, right? And you go to camp, and boy, you have that one camp service. And I've been in some camp service, everyone's just crying and hugging on each other and apologizing. I've had people come up to me and be like, I'm so sorry, I've been gossiping about you, and I've called you a loser, and you look weird, and I didn't know that, but thank you, And I've been in some services that are just, wow, highly emotional, and people are trying to get right. I've seen kids surrender the mission field and the ministry and tried to, I've watched kids burn, papers with their sins and besetting sins on them. I've seen kids weep. I've seen kids finally smile for the first time in a while. I've hugged kids after the preaching, after they get something right with the Lord, and seen some incredible life changes. And I've a lot of times seen that same young person, and they don't get anything right, and they don't do anything really much in church until the next camp season. And they do it again. Now, I'm not upset that they're getting things right every year at camp. That's better than nothing, right? But you know what? I'd really like to see them live in between camp in July and the next camp in July and be consistent as they can throughout the year, right? So that's what we're looking at in Nehemiah. So I want you to, with that in your mind, as we look at these passages of Scripture, I want you to keep that in your mind. And we're going to look at what they do after the wall's built, right? The title is Building After Brokenness. And now we're going to kind of look at, and I probably should have even changed the title to some sustaining after building. Because now you got to do some sustaining. And let me say this. How many of you like to build things? Anybody? And you go through creative, who many likes to draw or do graphic design or anything like that? There we go. I see you, sister. Notice it's a Dallas Cowboys fan. By marriage. By marriage. Yeah, by marriage. Look, listen. I shouldn't even say that name on the stage anymore. God has taken his hand off the Cowboys. It's the hardest thing I've ever said. Let's just close. Let's bow in prayer. Anyway, but my dad would be so ashamed of me for saying that. If you know my father, don't tell him I said that, Chris. Don't tell him I said that. But if you ever gone through the creative process, there's that initial ideation that's really fun. And you get what could it look like? And you get all these ideas in your head, and you're kind of sketching some things out. And whether you're going to a sketch pad, or you're jumping on a computer, or you're going to AutoCAD, or whatever, I don't know, whatever program, Photoshop, Illustrator, Dreamweaver, Canva, it doesn't matter. You go to it, and you're like, this is what we can do, and these are some ideas, and maybe you're using an app on your iPad, and you're sketching digitally, and it just, if you get, my wife thinks I'm a nerd, because if my dream vacation is a stack of books, a sketchbook, and a few pencils, and I don't even need food. Just kidding. Food's nice. I'd be wearing it, obviously, but it'd be great. Well, that's a fun part of it. But, every project has that middle or that end. You ever meet somebody that they're really good at starting a project, but they're terrible about finishing? You ever meet someone and you work with someone, they never put the tools away, they never clean up the scrap wood, they never sweep, they never vacuum, man, that could get frustrating. I've had people do work in my house. Jason's done work in my house. And when he did the work in my house, you would never know they cleaned up everything. They started and they ended every day that they had to work, right? It wasn't like I walked into a pile of sawdust, right? But now I've had projects, especially at churches sometimes, when you got volunteers that are busy and they have a different way of doing things. And also you can't fire a volunteer. You want to keep them. You're also afraid of the wife, if Terry, or Pat, or if Bill Winter and Terry come in to do something and I fire them, I'm afraid of their wives. I'm not making Pat Winter and Sonia. Are you kidding me? The dynamic duo of doom right there. I'm going to be nice to those guys. Well, you have guys. I remember one time we had these guys, they were putting light bulbs and changing ballasts in this old building we had in our church in North Carolina across the street where the church had moved from years ago, and the teens met in the old auditorium, and we had to get a lot of stuff done. And I walked in, and they're fluorescent light bulbs, and they just kind of tossed them to the side when they would, instead of walk down the ladder and put them down carefully, they were in a hurry, and they would just toss light bulbs to the side. Well, those things were shattering everywhere. And that's not good. I got kids that might run through there barefoot. At the time, John was a young person, 7th grader. He was barely potty trained. I didn't want him to get glass in his feet. It was crazy. And I went over there and I was so mad. How can you just, But I learned not everybody, every different, that middle stage to the end stage to cleaning up, that's the boring part. It really is. And I've seen a lot of people where they have the end project, and even the project's done, but the cleanup afterwards. You ever cook an incredible meal? Just an incredible meal, and you enjoy it. Not only, to me, it's not always about the food, it's about the experience. I like people, and I'll take friends and we'll go eat, and don't get me wrong, I love the food more than them, but I'm glad they're there too. I like to drink different coffee, and you get a nice a nice pour over at a coffee shop and you try a different origin roast and it's a blast. And I was at Jethro's house a couple weeks ago and I was drinking a coffee with a friend, but have you ever made this meal and you have the experience of making it and then you have the experience of enjoying it, right? It's fun to enjoy it. But then you got to clean up. Then you have to clean up. Is your family one of those families where it's such a mess to clean up Thanksgiving, you just created a tradition of putting a sheet over it and you'll come back later for the pickings? And like 35% of that is you just don't want to clean it up. Or the dishes are just like, wow, those are a lot of dishes. And then I remember that's why I had kids. And so Ryan and Caitlin, it's time to do the dishes. And they do it, and they love it. They love it so much. They also love, living in my house and enjoying the heat and propane now that I remember to get it filled up. But look, if we're not careful, and we're going to look at this in Nehemiah, I know there's a lot of introduction before we look at the Bible, and we're going to look at a lot of Bible tonight, but understand that. With this building of the wall, there was an after to it. They had to sustain that wall. They had to live in the principles of God. The book of the law that they unearthed, they have to read it and live it and commit to it. And it's an incredible, incredible story. But we're in Nehemiah chapter number 9. Nehemiah chapter number 9, verse 33. So Nehemiah 9:33. Howbeit thou art just in all that is brought upon us. So they're saying, God, you're right for what you did to us. For thou hast done right, for we have done wickedly. Neither have our kings, our princes, our priests, and our fathers kept thy law, nor hearkened unto thy commandments and thy testimonies, wherewith thou didst testify against them. For they have not served thee, in their kingdom and in thy great goodness that thou gavest them, and in the large and fat which thou gavest before them, neither turned they from their wicked works. Behold, we are servants this day, and for the land that thou gavest unto our fathers, to eat the fruit thereof and the good thereof. Behold, we are servants in it. And it yieldeth much increase unto the kings whom thou hast set over us because of our sins. Also, they have dominion over our bodies and over our cattle at their pleasure, and we are in great distress. And because of all this, listen to this, because of all this, we make a sure covenant. And watch this, and write it, and our princes, Levites, and priests seal unto it. Now look at that. That's important. Because what's happening is they're coming to this realization, they're reading the book of the law, they've already dedicated, they've praised God. God's gotten glory, not just from them, but from the people that are not the Jewish people, the people that are not the children of Israel, the outsiders, the pagans, the heathen that were against them, that were observing them. They have to give God glory. Like there's no other way this could happen where these walls are built in 52 days if God wasn't on their side. So God gets glory. But then what they do is they find the book of the law, they're reading it, Zerubbabel's reading it, it's amazing what's happening. They're having revival. And they realize the whole reason they're in the mess they're in is because they messed up and their fathers messed up and their kings messed up and the judges messed up. And because all of these people failed the covenant of God and failed on their obligation to the promise of God, they were judged. And they take ownership in it. We talked about that the first week of this lesson where Nehemiah, who had probably grown up, for all we know for sure, I'm 100% sure basically that he grew up and he was raised to be the cupbearer in a foreign land and had never even been to Jerusalem. He'd never even seen it. And so he wasn't he wasn't the one who actually sinned to bring them over, but he's still perpetuated that sin and he realizes it, right? And so he gets right with his own life. He realizes his culpability, his responsibility, that he's a part of the problem. And this is what the whole nation of Israel at this time does. All this remnant, they come together and they're like, we have messed up. But they don't stop there. And sometimes if we're not careful, we stop there where we're like, I messed up, I'm sorry. And I say this a lot to young people that mess up in the school where they make a mistake and they'll say, I'm sorry. And sometimes a lot of times I'll say, I'm glad you're sorry. What are you going to do to fix it? And there are times where two young people get in a fight or an altercation or they're rude to one another or dismissive of one another. And they need to go make that right with the other student, right? And so I ask him, that's fine. I'm glad you're upset. I'm glad you're mad at yourself. I'm glad you're realizing your mistake. And I'm glad you're sorry. But what are you going to do to fix it? What are you going to do to make the situation better? And so what they do, and you look at it in verse number 38, it says, and because of all this, we make a sure covenant. Now, I love how the Bible throws adjectives in there. I like to focus on those at times. I love it. He could have said a covenant, but he says a sure covenant. Like, this is how I feel about this one, or how it reads. It's like, this time we mean it. Have you ever messed up? Who has ever been in a lot of trouble with your wife? I mean, just so much. Steve, put your hand down. You don't have to. I'm just kidding. He didn't raise his hand. But you've been so much trouble with your wife. And you're in trouble because what she's upset at you for, what he's upset at you for, if you're the wife, is that you've done it before. You forgot again. I had a silly illustration, but I had to really apologize to my wife this last week. I pulled in to the house. It was raining a couple nights this week, right? And where our propane tank sits, it's a little bit downhill, about 30 feet away from my driveway. It's not hard for me to get. I mean, it's harder than it used to be after my amputation. But when the grass is wet, I just don't like the feeling of walking down a hill with my. And I'm like, I need to go look at how much propane we have. But it'll be. I mean, we just filled it up. It feels like we'll be all right. Forgot about it for a couple of days. And we got home Monday night, and our house was like 57 degrees. And I said, well, that's weird. I was like, wow, that Google Nest sure is saving money. And I was exhausted. We had had a game that day, and I had gotten up pretty early, and so I had had a very long day. And I did some work in my office, and then I went into my bedroom, and I was reading in bed. And my wife was talking to the kids in the hallway, and I heard my wife say, oh, wait, are we out of propane? And immediately, I'm like, oh no, that would be my fault. I should have checked the other night. And sure enough, we check, we're out of propane. So next day I call Amiclola Propane, and by the way, they were super gracious, super good to me. But they were like 4 days out because everyone was running out because it was cold, And I've never had propane on a house before. I didn't even know it was legal. Like, I thought they set something up kind of shady for me. I thought you just grilled with propane. Is propane natural gas? And I remember when the realtor showed it to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what propane is. I thought she was just calling propane natural gas propane. I straight up did not, propane. I'm thinking that was like a little tank canister on the side of the kitchen. Anyway. But apparently it's important, and I ran out of propane. And when they do that, they have to come in your house and light the pilot lights and do a leak test. And it's a mess. Who has propane? You know what I'm talking about. Who knows more than I do about propane? And you're laughing at the city boy who has no idea. Yeah, okay. So, and I'm like, oh, but here's the thing. It wouldn't have been as big of a deal, but I did this last year, right? So I really felt bad. So yesterday I called him, and Chris was actually in the car with me. I was running an errand, and Chris went with me, and we actually met in Dewey Moore for breakfast, and like an early breakfast meeting, and we're walking, and I'm like, Chris, do you mind if I make a call right now? I got to save my marriage. And he heard me call Amiclola Propane. And did I not beg a little bit? Like, hey, listen, I know that this happened last year, but my wife is mad at me, and I have one leg, and have you ever heard of the dump truck? I did everything I could. And she's like, let me call the driver. And then the phone would, and then they finally got a hold of the driver, and they came. And I thought they forgot about me. They didn't pull in last night until after 7 p.m. And they pulled in, and as soon as I heard that beep, 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 I was the only one that heard it. My wife and kids stayed at the school and church because they didn't want to come home to a cold house. And so I'm at home praying and slaving away and doing the laundry and the cooking and the dinner like usual. And I'm not a great husband, but I am better than everyone else. So the truck is backing up, and I never, when I heard that beep, because I had lost hope. I'm like, this is it. Another night of my wife waking up, and she does not like the cold, for the record. And I'm like, man, and it was 52 degrees in the house at this point. I mean, this is unlivable conditions. My kids are going to get taken away by DSS. This is horrible. And so when I heard that beep, though, I knew my marriage is saved. My marriage is saved. And those guys were super kind. I'm like, hey, guys, I'm sorry you're here so late. And one guy goes, it's all right, buddy. It's a pleasure. We're happy to help you. And I'm like, wow, are you supposed to tip propane guys? I don't even know. Like, there's just, do you want a drink? You know, what do you want? Like, he's like, nah, we're fine. I'm like, these are the greatest guys. And now I have propane. But I profusely apologized to my wife and kids because it was my fault. I messed up. And I should have protected them from the cold a little bit better than that. And we paid an extra service fee because of it, and I don't like that at all. And but even more than the money, I don't want my kids and wife to, die of frostbite, which possibly could have happened according to what my wife said in between the beeps from the VidAngel. But I'm kidding. But like, I'm telling you, we've all been there before, right? Where you mess up, but you're like, but this time it's different. So I remember I told her, I'm like, I'm so sorry, honey. I'm putting a reminder in my phone. I'm going to put a reminder in my phone tomorrow when I wake up. I'm going to put a reminder in my phone that we won't run out of propane. Ask me if I have that reminder on my phone. I just realized that. I don't even have a reminder on my phone yet. But you know how it is. I'm going to do it this time. And we know that this sure covenant that they said, we're going to do it. We know they didn't follow through. We know they didn't follow through. And we don't have time tonight because I don't want to keep you till 9:45. Although, if you want to stay. Wow, those are some dirty looks. I'm just joking. But you'll see, even in here, even the Bible reads like Nehemiah goes off to check on some things, and he comes back, and man, some things have changed, and he had to fix some things, and that's where we're going to go tonight. But Nehemiah chapter 9, we see it in verse 38, a sure covenant. Now go to Nehemiah chapter 10 and verse 28. Nehemiah 10, verse 28, it says this, and the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the porters, the singers, the Nethinims, and all they that had separated themselves from the people of the lands unto the law of God, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, everyone having knowledge and having understanding, they clave to their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and into an oath, to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord our God and his judgments and his statutes. So we literally see them walking more purposefully in the covenant. So they make the promise, and they're consistently making the promise to keep walking in the law of God. So we see this happening. It's taking place. The building's over. Now they've got to build their lives. The building of the wall is over. Now they've got to change their culture. The building of the wall is done. Now they have to build back up God's religion, what God built, what God wanted. They have to build up what God's chosen people are supposed to be. And they do that. They put that into practice. Turn to a few verses down, Nehemiah 10:34. Nehemiah 10:34, and we cast the lots among the priests, the Levites, and the people for the wood offering to bring it into the house of our God, after the houses of our fathers, at times appointed year by year, to burn upon the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law, and to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees year by year unto the house of the Lord. Now we see something here. We see they have this commitment. We're going to walk in the law of God. We're going to do what God wants us to do. We see that later they're going to go to church. They're going to protect and they're going to support and they're going to be a part of the house of God. We see that they're going to try to train their kids in what's right. But here's something that's interesting, and we see this in Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount. Your heart and your treasure, they're linked. And we see that they are so committed, they're actually going to give like they're supposed to God. And this is not a sermon about money, and I know anytime a preacher mentions money, everyone gets a little bit nervous. Let's be honest, right? But you can't separate. You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. True love means giving. We have our whole theme this year is love in action. And sometimes that action you're going to do is going to be giving. And that could mean giving of your time. It could mean giving of your attention. Hey guys, there's a lot of times where the biggest thing that you could help your marriage with is just giving your wife attention. Listening to her when she wants to tell you about her day. I know you're stressed. I know you have work to do. I know you got home and you've had a long day and the Duke game's on and we're all Duke fans and we're all excited about Cooper Flagg getting ACC Rookie of the Year again, right, John? Of course we are. We love Duke, okay? Of course we do. And some of you are Georgia Bulldog fans? Is that a team? I don't remember. But look, I'm kidding. Man, That was dirty looks. Look, you want to just sit there. You don't want to hear about her problems and something's wrong and another, sometimes it's a sacrifice to give attention. Sometimes it's a sacrifice to give your time. But you cannot separate out in the Bible New Testament and Old Testament and New Testament, Gospels, prophets, Pentateuch. Everywhere you go in Scripture talks about giving to the Lord. You can't separate it. And you could say, oh, that's New Testament, that's Old Testament, that's this. You can do whatever you want. But everywhere in the Bible it talks about giving. And I've never met a Christian that's willing to give of his time, attention, and his money who's not a happy, blessed Christian. I just haven't. I've met some stingy ones, and it seems like they always have something broken somewhere. But the truth of the matter, and I'm talking about in their heart and in their mind and their attitude and their life, but I just want to get this across. They were so committed, they put their money where their mouth was. You ever met somebody and they talk a big game and they have a lot of ideas and they like to tell you how you should do your job, but when it takes commitment from them to the point where they're going to have to start paying for something, you don't ever see them again. You ever seen that before? I've seen that. And it could be paying with your time or paying with your attention or paying with your money. We're going through a study in my class, and one thing we talked about is you worship what you worship, you give your time, money, and attention to. And it's just true. You can't separate those things. And I can tell what your favorite hobby is because what your time, attention, and your money goes towards. I joked around about Duke basketball. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we had some sports teams, but nationally they weren't always ranked, So I like to pick teams and conferences just to root for them. So I used to pick, tell Robert when you see him, I picked Michigan for the Big Ten. Just because, I don't know, I like the colors. They had the Fab Five back then. And, I like to think of myself as a pretty fly guy, and wore the baggy shorts and whatnot. Some saggy socks and stuff. Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, you know who I'm talking about, right? Jalen Rose. I loved Michigan. And then I liked, in the Big 12 at the time, I liked Texas, the Texas Longhorns. And and in the SEC, I actually picked Alabama. I had no idea that God was saying I would marry an Alabama princess. Had no idea. But in the ACC, I picked the team Duke. I just liked Duke. I liked back then when Christian Laettner played, I just liked Duke. Now, that turned into me really liking basketball. And all these other schools were mainly football kind of schools, and I really liked basketball. And so in high school, the basketball bug bit me really, really hard. And I worshiped basketball. And I put it in the wrong place in my life, honestly. Well, anyway, to this day, though, you know what my family does when a Duke game's on usually? We give our time, attention to it. And you know what? For my son's 19th birthday, guess where I took him, Mac? To a Duke game. Yeah, oh, wow, yeah, that was rude. But to a Duke game. For his 18th birthday, we went to Georgia Tech to watch Georgia Tech lose to Duke. You know what happened? Pastor's Georgia Tech, whatever the Yellow Jackets, ruined my son's 18th birthday. Oh, you're clapping. How dare you? I couldn't believe it. I'm like, Duke's going to whoop up on these guys. They're going to stop in the middle of the floor, try to do engineering calculations while Duke plays basketball. And Duke lost. And I walked out of there so ashamed. And I'll never forget telling Pastor, and his smile, I've never seen him smile like that. Like when Brian got saved and when all these people have gotten saved and you guys joined the church, he smiles. He never smiled that big. He was so happy that my son's 18th birthday was ruined. And that's how you Georgia Tech fans are. You just don't anyway. So look, but I put my time, attention, and we put our money to it. I joke around about that orange barrel that Ryan clipped. Well, we were driving late at night trying to get to a Duke game the next day for his 19th birthday at Cameron Indoor Stadium. It's a thing. Now, some of you have other things you like. Some of you like to hunt. Some of you like to fish. Some of you like to count money. Some of you like to clip coupons. Some of you like to thrift. How many of you, be honest, how many of you are wearing something you've thrifted right now? Yeah. The shirt I'm wearing, I thrifted because I spilled sauce on it 2 weeks ago. Be quiet. Anyway, look, you have things you like. You enjoy the activity of it. You enjoy the beginning of it, the ending of it, the process of it. It's fun. How many of you collect something? My dad's a big collector. basketball cards, baseball cards. Chris, you've been in the starting lineup room, right? Where all the starting lineup figurines are. My dad has a room from this low all the way to the ceiling, all the way around about a 4-foot by like 12-foot room, like a small office hallway thing. Look, it's literally every 10 inches is shelves with starting lineup basketball and football and baseball figurines. I grew up doing that stuff with my dad. He put his time and attention into it. And some of you, it could be video games, it could be actual playing sports, it could be, frisbee golf, working out, lifting weights, bench pressing other human beings. I don't know what you do, Mac, whatever you do. We all have things we give ourselves to, but as a Christian, our priority should be God. And the children of Israel, their priority was supposed to be God and the things of God. And so not only do they, but I want to show you this, not only does their intention start to go to God and their want to starts to go to God, but they put feet to their words, and then they put their money where their mouth is. They start giving. Just like the Bible had commanded them to give earlier, the law commanded them to give under Moses. And so we see that. So that's important to understand. Now, look at chapter 12. And, let's look at chapter 10, verse 39. It says this: "For the children of Israel and the children of Levi shall bring the offering of the corn and of the new wine and of the oil unto the chambers, where are the vessels of the sanctuary, and the priests that minister, and the porters and the singers, and we will not forsake the house of our God." So they're tying it all together. They're saying our own personal lives will be committed to God. Our money is going to be committed to God as He commanded us to give. We're going to put our heart into it, our finances into it, our elbow grease into it, our love into it. We're going to do that, and we're going to tie it all the way back to the house of God. Now, it changed a little bit in the New Testament, where the house of God, the temple of God, is you. The church is the temple of God, right? But we gather together as a church. And by the way, first century Christians, they didn't even understand the concept of like a church building. Like, we're the church. How many times do you say, I'm going to go down to the church and drop something off, and you mean this building? But that's not the church. That's a building that houses, it's convenient for us to meet, and it's cushy, and it's comfortable, and the air conditioning, and it's great, and there's lighting, and by the way, people cook sometimes. It's great. I love coming to a church building, but you're the church. So your commitment, that's why, if we do a huge study, it would be great, but that's why it's so important for us to love one another. And God tells us in John that if we don't love one another, what does the Bible say? We're going to be judged. The world will judge us based on how Christians love each other. Why? Because we're supposed to be committed to the house of God, to the people of God, to the dwelling of God. And everything changed at Calvary according to this. And so that's why I love this building. I love it, but it's just a building. And you can disagree with me on some of that. And if we're not careful, we get to where we worship the building. And I've seen that happen. I've known people they take their shoes off when they enter a church property. And don't get me wrong, I'm okay with that if that's your conviction or your standard or your preference. But we can't really hold other people to that because that's not in Scripture. This is just a building. It really is just a building. I love to see the kids running and playing. No, don't get me wrong. I want them to be safe, and I don't want them to be, and we don't want to be disrespectful or ruin something on the stage with the speakers. I thought it was funny. It was either last Wednesday or Sunday. Kids started to come up here on the platform, and look, it's not because they're evil. They're just kids, and this is kind of fun to be up here if you're a kid. Jumping off the side of the stage. I did that once. Didn't go well, but anyway. But it's a build, and don't get me wrong, they don't need to play on the stage, they don't need to run over older people in the hallway, but I love seeing our kids have a childhood here, right? But it's not about being in this building, it's about being around the people of God. I've seen this happen, where churches just complain about all the kids making a mess in the church, and sure enough, churches like that, they don't have kids anymore. And you can go all across this country to churches where predominantly 90% and more of them are 60 and 70 and older. And God bless those saints of God. I hope they're getting everything they can from their church body that they're gathering with. But I want a church like our church where we have We have a Teen Connect room packed out right now. They're excited to be there. They're learning the Bible and playing ping pong and goofing off together and just forming connections and building memories. We have an Awana program down here that's busting at the seams, that Miss Mary and Mr. Will and Patrick's in there and Preston, and they're working like crazy with all those kids. We have a nursery, and if we don't have a nursery, we'll go crazy, won't we? Like, I love that we have a multi-generational church. But don't forget, like, that's a gift. And the building, this is important to understand, because we have to understand, when I walk in this building, I need to find out, hey, does Mac need anything? Man, Mac looks a little discouraged today. I'm going to go up and make sure he's okay and just say hi. Oh, man, John looks a little dismayed. I'm going to go up and just give him a little fist bump, a little dab, telling him his fit looks riztastic. I don't know, however those young people talk. Like, I'm going to, just look at, oh, hey, there's Raymond. I wonder if he needs anything. And, oh, there's Monique. I'll go. She's going to yell at me about something. And I'll go, no, I'm just kidding. I'll check. I'll go, oh, there's Lang. Let me go ask him to do free electrical work, whatever. And, but there's people, oh, there's Pat and Bill Winter. I wonder if they need anything for their Sunday school class. And, there's the Tinsleys. Oh, I love him walking up and protecting us up there on security every Sunday, and I goof off. And I always tell him at 9:45, oh, I guess I got to go get spiritual in my Sunday school class, right? And then there's Jason, and there's Nathan. Like, anybody need anything? There's Lynn Fawcett. Like, he didn't blow himself up at work this week. I'm glad, And we check on each other. We pray for each other. We have each other's back. But if we get our priorities all discombobulated, we'll forget that we're supposed to have our purpose where God's purpose is. And the Bible tells us that God literally died, gave his son. Jesus gave his life on earth, went through pain unimaginable for his church. So if he did that for his church, I think I should protect it. I should love it. I should minister to it. I should serve it. I should check on it. And we see that with Nehemiah. The people, the building, the processes, the commitment, the covenant, all of that's coming into play where they're trying to do it the way they're supposed to do it. And then in Nehemiah 12:30, it says, and the priests and the Levites purified themselves. And I'm going to set this up for next week. And so we can come and kind of wrap up Nehemiah 12. And this is an interesting story. And I set this up. This is kind of, I know Nehemiah obviously is a series that we're getting the same book. But if this week and next week, if any 2 weeks are important to be together, it's this week and next week. Because we've set up this standard of this is how we're doing it. But then we see something kind of falls apart. It's kind of an interesting story. If you want to read ahead and you're the type that likes the spoilers, go for it. I think it'd be interesting. But Nehemiah 12:30 says, and the priests and the Levites purified themselves and purified the people and the gates and the wall. So they purified it. They sanctified it. They made it special. And then it says, verse number 43, so jump ahead 13 verses. Also that day they offered great sacrifices. There's another one of those adjectives that don't have to be there, but God thought it was important. Not just sacrifices, they offered great sacrifices. Why'd they do that? And they rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The wives also and the children rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard even from afar off. So we see this. He puts this in here on purpose, that afar off it's heard. So people that aren't in Jerusalem, that aren't a part of the rejoicing, that aren't a part of the party, that weren't a part of the building process, that didn't come back with Nehemiah or weren't a part of the remnant and that came back earlier. And they were afar off and they're witnessing God get the victory. And I don't know about you, but all of these things we've seen Nehemiah set up and God do through Nehemiah. And all these things we've seen them build the wall. We've seen them celebrate when it's time to celebrate. We've seen them weep when it's time to weep. We've seen them get right with God when it's time to get right with God. We've seen them beg forgiveness when it's time to beg forgiveness. And we've seen them every step of the way. And then at the end of it, we see this awesome party, this awesome sacrifice fest, and this rejoicing where God's getting the glory. And people that aren't a part of the body of Christ, that aren't a part of the children of Israel, are watching Israel get the victory. And I'll say this. Your life and the way you live life, you work with people, you live next door to people, you're in the same earthly family with people, and they're watching how you represent the family of God. And they know if you have the victory in your life or not. Let me ask you a question, and we're going to go here in a minute. Let me ask you a question, though. If the output or the product of your Christian life is the only thing that would convince someone to come to Christ, would it be powerful enough? What do I mean by that? So if someone were to look at your fruit of the Spirit, your ability to give, your willingness to serve, your kindness, your forgiveness, your disposition, your love, your joy, your peace, your long-suffering, your goodness, your gentleness, your kindness. If all they had to know about Christ and to realize if it was a good thing or not, if all they had was your life and your fruit, what would it tell them? You ever been trying to make a decision about something and you know people that have the product and you ask them, hey, do you like that? Is it working for you? I'll tell you what, with the school, the best thing that we've had with the school is just word of mouth. We really do. When they walk in those doors and they're a student at Lighthouse Christian Academy, we really do love them. We will bend over backwards to help them learn. If they need tutoring, we'll find a way to do it. If finances come into play, if it's at all possible, if we can help them, we will do it because we really do feel called to love those kids. And as long as I'm there and the school, as long as I'm on staff at Lighthouse Christian Academy and Lighthouse Baptist Church, and I believe I can say this for every single staff member, as long as they're putting that LCA badge on their staff shirt, they love those students. And because of that fruit of parents seeing the love we have for the students, are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. Do we make mistakes sometimes? Sure, of course we do. But overall, it comes from I've watched teachers get here. I had a teacher this morning get here 6:15 to start and was tutoring a student. A parent was there with a student really early getting tutored. I had teachers and staff literally in their classrooms all the way up until church started, putting in the hours, working to make the classroom better, grading tests. And that love is a fruit that other people see, and it's noticeable. I'll say this about young people. They know if you really care about them. I'll say this about lost people. They know if you really care about God. Let me ask you that. Does your lost neighbor know that you really care about God by the way you live your life? You say, it's not about works, it's about grace, Brother Jeff. I agree. But you show me your faith and I'll show you my works, my faith by my works. James says, I'll put my feet, I'll put my hands, I'll put my activity, I'll put my mind, I'll put my outpouring of love where my mouth is. And if we're just doing lip service, people realize it. Let me ask you a question, and we've all been there before, and it's sad that I even have to say it, but how many of you remember the time where there was a Christian you really looked up to, that you really thought was doing something, that you had just kind of put on a little bit of a pedestal? Maybe it was a Christian school teacher. Maybe it was a principal of a Christian school. Maybe it was a principal. Maybe it was a dad, a mom, an aunt, an uncle, a youth pastor, a friend, a mentor, someone who discipled you. Remember how you felt when you realized they weren't living up to the standard that they claimed they were living up to? Remember how devastating that was for you? Now, let me ask you a question. Is that you to somebody else right now? Or, if they knew the truth, would it be? We hold a huge, huge obligation with our life. And it's true, I've heard it, and it's cliche maybe, and it's a colloquialism in churches, especially Baptist churches, but your life is the only Bible someone will ever read. And if the only Bible they're reading is your life, what is it saying? And this whole story about Nehemiah is this beautiful story about God loving people and forgiving people and doing something with these people. And then them giving him glory and him doing that. And then, but we're going to see it next week. Things start crumbling. Things start falling apart. And if we're not careful, listen, we'll be super Christians during Hell's Gates. We'll be awesome Christians when we're inviting everybody to Easter. We'll be like, little Peter, James, and John's when we're doing VBS. But in the humdrum, everyday day of life, your neighbor sees you flipping out on your wife. Your school teacher gets an email that is incredibly rude and it didn't need to be. Your mom or your dad that you're trying to take care of that are older or neglected because you're just annoyed with them. Your kids are neglected because you just are too tired to deal with them. Your own wife is alienated because you've put something else in her place in your life, whether it's TV or the internet or hunting or fishing or camping or Duke basketball. Your life is incredibly important. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking you to put a front on. I want you to believe it in your heart. I want me to believe it in my heart. And it be so real and so true that it can't help but come out. But it's important. And we see that over and over and over and over. And one of the hardest things, and I'll end with this, one of the hardest things that I've seen is young people. They've done studies, and we've watched young people just walk away from the faith at 18. And when they can stop going to church, when they're not mandated or made to go to church, they'll just walk away. And it breaks my heart. I don't understand it. Like, how does that happen? Do you know that it's something like if you grow up in a Christian home and your parents are consistently Christian, and with your parents you actively do personal evangelism or charity of some sort, you're more apt to stay in church. Like you're like 15 times more likely to stay in church or something like that. And if you grow up in a home where you can see that your dad or your mom, they make no bones about it, and they actively don't like God, they actively don't like Christ, and they don't believe in it, but they let you kind of go to church and whatever, that kid has a better chance of making it for God from a heathen home with parents that want nothing to do with the gospel or God. That child has an 8 times greater chance of making it for God than a teenager or a young person that grows up in a home where mom and dad claim to be Christians and claim to believe certain things, but live differently at home than they do at church. It's devastating. I've had teenagers call me freaking out because mom's about to beat dad again, and he doesn't know what to do, and she doesn't know what to do. And it's not happened in a while, but he doesn't know if it's going to happen, but they've been fighting a lot, and they cuss all the time, and every one of those kids that came from families like that fall away from God at one point. Some of them have come back, but man, the scars they have are brutal. You have no idea how important it is to stay right, to stay true, to take that sure covenant and actually live it out. Put your money where your mouth is, put your feet where the purpose of God takes you, and never look back. And if we can't do that in the humdrum day-to-day life in between the big events, it's dangerous. So understand that. Look at Nehemiah. Read it on your own. It's an amazing book. It's an incredible story that can be analyzed and figuratively and literally just thrown at us and say, wow, we need to change some stuff. We need to reevaluate some priorities in our life, and we need to recommit ourselves to God. Lord,